This is Bloomberg Businessweek. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine, plus global business, finance, and tech news. The Bloomberg Businessweek podcast with Massar and Tim Stenovec from Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Bloomberg Businessweek Weekend Podcast. It was a busy summer week that included another Fed rate hike, a regional bank takeover, a historic run of gains for the Dow, and a batch of earnings from mega caps, Microsoft, Alphabet, and Meta. And the subject of AI and the cloud came up in those reports. And on that, in the magazine, a story about big data centers and their use of a very precious commodity. That story coming right up. And speaking of the big tech companies, Amazon reports this coming week, and a range of topics may come up on the call, including what might be the most intrusive scrutiny in the company's history. Plus, we'll talk with the CEO of Mattel on earnings, a key figure leaving the C-suite, and whether that Hollywood labor dispute is hurting the toy maker's film ambitions, even as Barbie keeps raking it in at the box office. All of that to come. We begin with a lesson in behavioral economics from one of the pioneers in the field. Peter Atwater is an adjunct professor of economics at William & Mary. He coined the term K-shaped recovery. He's here to help us navigate these unusual economic and market times with his new book, The Confidence Map, Charting a Path from Chaos to Clarity. We began by asking for his reaction to the latest round of U.S. monetary policy tightening from Jay Powell and the Fed this past Wednesday. Tim, no doubt about it, we're living in interesting economic and market times. We're coming off a pandemic, unprecedented, and we're going to talk about that word, unprecedented stimulus and easing to ensure the functioning of the financial system and really to help protect the livelihoods of many. The end result, an economy that stopped short, then was revved up again, big time, but we got persistent inflation, which has come down. But nonetheless, it was an interesting time. It was the backdrop, certainly for the Fed, the last couple of years. But it's a recovery, too, that wasn't felt by all. And that was something that was coined the K-shaped recovery by our next guest.
And so with all of that going on and more, we are so delighted to have with us in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio, Peter Atwater. He's adjunct professor of economics at William & Mary. He's a former banker and someone who spent many years in financial services and in the securitization of assets. He's been a financial consultant, and he's also got a way forward for all of us thanks to his brand new book. It came out this week. It's called The Confidence Map, Charting a Path from Chaos to Clarity. It's a book that our very own Mike Regan says is a great beach read.
Which is a big endorsement.
Welcome, Peter. It's good to have you in the studio, and congratulations on the book.
Thanks so much, Tim. And Carol, great to be here.
Well, it's so great to have you here. First up, we would be remiss if we didn't ask you about the Fed meeting and what you make of it. Anything unusual or telling, especially as you think about your book?
Yeah, it was the lack of unusual today. This was like a dive that hit the water and there was no splash. Normally after a Fed announcement, there's a lot of battling in social media and different takes. There were no takes today.
It was kind of boring, right?
It was beyond boring. This was nothing about nothing today. And it's been interesting because in the last couple of weeks, we've seen investors take everything off the worry list. And I think this came off the worry list too. There's a sense that everything is going to be okay. We're not worried about a recession. Inflation looks like it's going to keep coming down or is coming down to a reasonable level. And if I have a take from today, it's this sense of where's the shoe that's going to drop next?
Yeah, it's sort of like a complacency. I think it was Tom Keene who was asking Diane Swank about parallels to what we saw before the NASDAQ crash in the early 2000s.
Yeah, this is what's been interesting on the NASDAQ front is we've seen investors racing into all these abstract stocks 2 years ago, the SPACs and that NFT mania. This year, they're charging into the stalwarts, the thoroughbreds that are well tested, Apple, the Magnificent Seven. And that to me is an indicator that we're not as risk-taking as we were a couple of years ago, that we're looking for certainty in the companies that we're investing in, and too much possibility scares us.
Take us to the confidence quadrant then. All right, this is your book, and explain this, because there's stress center versus comfort zone, passenger seat versus launch pad. But I love this, and you, as you're right, can kind of apply to anything and everything. So take us to, should we be in the stress center or comfort zone right now? Because it does feel like there's so much growth in terms of optimism, whether it's S&P strategists or economists saying, oh, no recession, so help us out.
Yeah, so for the benefit of your listeners, this is a book that looks at the impact of certainty and control on the choices we make, because we use the word confidence all the time and we don't know what it means. And so what I tried to do was to really dig into it, and those two things are really important. I need to know what's coming, and I need to feel like I'm prepared for that. That's what creates confidence. And I would say that if I look at...
So it's not Elon Musk confidence?
No, that's confidence theater. That's
okay.
and that's, and we see a lot of that, and
right.
maybe too much of it. And I worry that a lot of people think that that's what you need to be confident. It's like, no. That's an act. That's a show that people put on really well.
So can you explain the framework that you developed here and what to do if you find yourself basically in the wrong quadrant?
Yeah, so the framework takes confidence or takes certainty and control and puts them on two axes. It's a simple 4-box chart. And none of them is inherently good or bad, but we feel very different in them. And I would say today, most investors feel like they're in the comfort zone. Things feel easy. It's like they're driving on a clear highway on a clear day. And that's both good and bad, because the more confident we are, the less we think, the less we pay attention. And so that's a big risk. And we also take more risk than we should. And that's a potential consequence that we need to consider. But I also then look at the consumer, and there are a lot of consumers in the stress center today, particularly those who are trying to buy a house or buying a car, because interest rates have been very punitive to those at the bottom. Those at the top, it's been wonderful. Cash is now earning 4%, 5%. But for those at the bottom, there's been a real headwind that's come about because they're on a payment. They pay by month.
Right.
And these hikes in interest rates have made their lives far more expensive.
So why is it important, though, to understand kind of where you are, whether you're too complacent or you're comfortable, or whether you're stressed out? Like, why is it important? And I think about, when you think about stress, we've been there a lot as in a market environment, in an economic environment, whether it's the pandemic, 9/11, the great financial crisis, right? Like, help me out here.
Yeah, so we forget that real life moves us around.
Yeah.
So we can be in the stress center in one moment and then be in the comfort zone the next. But we forget that when we're in the stress center. If you go back to COVID, we were catastrophizing that the end of the world was here. And we forget that as we're moving into the stress center and panic's occurring, panic is almost God's way of telling us the worst is behind us. And certainly that's proven over and over in the markets. But we fall victim to it. And we respond impulsively and emotionally rather than stepping back to say, oh, panic means we're nearing a low in confidence. And rather than throwing the baby out with the bathwater, we should be preparing for what's coming next, because it's going to surprise everybody.
So how do we do that right now in the context of this run-up that we've seen in the markets? How does an investor use these tools?
I think investors need to look and see that our preferences have changed. We're getting more conservative behind the scenes, even though the indices are moving to record highs. So you want to recognize that while we're in the comfort zone, we're nowhere near as craving possibility and abstraction as we were 2 years ago. And also appreciate that there's an enormous disconnect between market confidence today and Main Street confidence. And with wealth so concentrated in so few hands, that tension will certainly play out if the economy turns down. I always think if we're in the comfort zone, we don't anticipate a recession, and that becomes really dangerous when we all think that moment has passed.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that, because I think about how much we talk about consumer sentiment or consumer confidence or business sentiment and business confidence, right? These things can certainly shape our actions, and certainly as investors, our expectations of kind of where assets should go.
Yeah, how we feel shapes our actions, also shapes the stories we tell. And so
The narrative
is simply a reflection on how we feel. And here again, the narrative today is the coast is clear, relax. If there's going to be a recession, it's going to be shallow, if at all. Inflation's come down considerably from where we were. And so investors are looking out ahead and not appreciating that risks come out of nowhere.
Well, that's what I was going to say. And we've got to do a little bit of news. But, when you're in the comfort zone and you're kind of relaxed, I mean, this is when all of a sudden there's a regional bank problem or there's a crypto collapse, right? Like it feels like what you're saying is we can kind of anticipate maybe not exactly what's going to go wrong, but that something's going to go wrong.
Absolutely.
And we can kind of figure it out. Could we anticipate that a Bernie Madoff was going to happen?
Yeah, because the more confident we are, the less we scrutinize. And we fall victim to con men at both extremes.
Financial FOMO?
FOMO. And at lows in confidence, we follow the wrong people.
I want to get right back to Peter Atwater, his new book, The Confidence Map, Charting a Path from Chaos to Clarity, a professor at William & Mary. So I said unprecedented, events being unprecedented. You know that they are entirely predictable. Is that true? Even black swans are entirely predictable?
If you look at the backdrop of how people feel, they're much more predictable than we realize. The means may change, but extremely vulnerable people always do the same 5 things. People who are extremely confident have a similar series of things that they do. And so if I know how people feel, I'm not going to be nearly as surprised by what they do. And I lived this with my class as COVID was beginning to take hold, and every week we would say, is confidence higher or lower? And if it got lower and lower, and each week they would say, so since it's lower, what are people going to do next? And as we approached March, they were the ones who told me, Professor, you need to pack everything up for spring break, and because we're not going to come back if confidence continues to fall. And so we tend to overlook that as confidence is changing, our choices change, and there are clear connections between what we want and what we feel. And we look at events as being the event, not the decisions made moment before the event. If I think about 9/11, we would say that caused American confidence to fall. But if you look at the backdrop, confidence in the Middle East was really low. And so you could understand why people who are feeling hopeless might undertake that. Same thing with the Arab Spring.
So a skeptic of your framework might say it's very easy to connect the dots when you look back, but how do we look forward and use this framework to predict the future?
So that's what I try to do with investors in real time, with corporate executives, in trying to help them to realize that the choices are changing quickly based on how we feel. And I found myself in COVID working with corporations trying to rejigger their messages, because when we lack confidence, we need simplicity. We crave nostalgia. And so if we can watch as people are changing their mood, we can better anticipate what to do in response. And that was one of the things that emergency room doctors and first responders really showed me, that these are things you can prepare for and train to anticipate how to behave in a crisis.
Right. Many of them were prepared for trauma, right? So, and that when it came. So, okay, I'm thinking people are at home or they're driving or they're going to download this podcast or download this later as a podcast. And they're like, okay, so how do I apply that to investing? And how should I be thinking about it in today's market environment?
So one of the things I think investors need to be careful about today is the historical relationship between stocks and bonds seems to have broken down. That we think of this in terms of a diversified pool, that owning stocks helps you because they do better when stocks do worse. And the reality is that not that long ago, confidence in both stocks and bonds was staggeringly high. We had trillions of dollars worth of negative yielding bonds. At the same time, we're stampeding into crypto and all of these crazy things. And we didn't realize that every piece of that pie, that diversified pie, was piping hot. So you need to think about not historical correlations, but how do investors feel about what you own? Because you want to own you want to own hopeless. At the same time, you want to own things that we're excited because it's Tomorrowland. And having a mix of moods in your portfolio, because that's where the real benefit of diversification comes from.
A mix of moods.
A mix of moods.
That's interesting. What?
I like that. I mean, what does a mix of moods look like? Obviously, it depends on your age and your risk tolerance, but how do you take a mood and apply that to an ETF or to a fund or to a stock?
Well, price is a great way to discover it, because I think market prices are a barometer of mood. So you could have looked at the price of natural gas last summer and seen that, we were terrified that there was going to be enormous scarcity, and now there's immense complacency in that sector. That there's views of abundance forever, and so you want to be thinking about where is there intense scarcity, where are people stampeding in, and where are they stampeding out.
All right, I'm going to go dark for you. Charting a path from chaos to clarity. I feel like climate change is one of those, this is an existential question for all of us and situation. So how do you think about that?
So climate change is a very abstract concept. And if you look at our eagerness to address climate change, it migrates with our level of confidence. And what you'll find is that when confidence is high, we want to tackle climate change proactively. That our focus is prevent the problem. And when confidence falls, our response to climate change is we need to deal with the consequences of having not dealt with it. And so if confidence falls, I think you'll start to see that our interest in solving it is swapped out for our need to address the fact that we didn't. And so that's a behavioral change, because we move from abstract possibility to immediate need and vulnerability.
Because it's all I think about.
But that vulnerability affects different people depending on where they live. If they live, and I think maybe one thing that changed was true. When, the skies over so much of this part of the country turned red a few months ago because of Canadian wildfires. I mean, we're in an area that's not traditionally affected by wildfires, but we're seeing the effects of that. Yeah,
so we need abstract vulnerabilities to become real. Think about COVID. COVID did not become real for most Americans until March 11th,
Absolutely.
The night that Tom Hanks and Rudy Gobert were the headlines.
And the NBA.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
and
remember that
suddenly
right.
that was the tipping point. And boom, we all felt it, and you could see it. It was like a wildfire of a shift in sentiment.
It's so true. For so long, we were like, it's not going to be our problem. It's not going to be our problem. It's not going to be our problem.
All the stories, went along with that.
Yeah, and I have to say, as a journalist, I felt kind of stupid, like on the other side. Like how did we miss this when we're thinking, how could this not impact us? Thank you so much. Peter Atwater, thank you so much. Such a treat to have you in studio. The book is The Confidence Map, Charting a Path from Chaos to Clarity. I'm actually heading to a beach, so I'm taking this with me because I've just done a little bit of reading, but I want to read it.
Well, it just came out, Carol. So,
I know.
to
Peter,
be fair.
thank you. Good luck with it. Come back soon. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern. Listen on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
We have been focusing big time on mega cap tech earnings. Microsoft, Alphabet, you got Amazon next week. And as they report, we always focus on a very key metric, Tim, and it is all about their cloud business. We did that last night with Microsoft, a little bit of a disappointment. It's a big business, we know, when it comes to cloud. And as a news story in Businessweek notes, the cloud is part of an ecosystem that consumes many resources, including water.
Yeah, this was really surprising to me because I've heard the cloud consumes a lot of energy. Check out this story in the new issue. It's on newsstands later this week. It's already online at Bloomberg.com/businessweek. It's, of course, on the Bloomberg terminal. It's also among the most read on the terminal today. The editor on the story, Bloomberg Businessweek technology editor Joshua Brustein, with us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. It's incredible to see this story. We knew that they use a lot of energy, but water. Just how much water do data centers use?
Well, data centers are actually, it's a bit of a question because tech companies haven't generally been reporting on how much water their data centers are using. As you said, electricity has been a big deal, but basically what happens is you have these computer servers running, they're running very hot, and they use water to cool them down. As an example, Meta is planning on building a data center in a drought-stricken area of Spain. And it's expected to use about 665 million liters a year.
So let's talk geography here, because the story goes into why these data centers are located where they are. Why not put this somewhere near that's not drought-stricken?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think they're looking for a couple of things when you're siting a data center. You want access to cheap electricity, you want access to water, and you want access to a government that will allow you to build a data center. And what you found is that some areas where there is plentiful water have started to oppose these data centers exactly for the tax they put on resources.
I felt what was really interesting. There's a quote in the story that says, people don't realize that the cloud is real, that it is part of an ecosystem that consumes many resources. I mean, you're right. We're learning, like, we all talk about cloud and we just think it's just where our photos go. And if you're a business, just a lot of information goes. And all we know is with AI, it's going to be even more in demand, correct? And so we're going to continue to see data centers all around the world, if you will. And there are costs to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like with so much things with tech, it just seems so clean, so easy. Right. And then behind it, there's a lot going on that we don't have to think about if we don't want to.
What are companies doing though? So listen, I'm curious about the oversight, Joshua. Like, aren't companies, they talk about being green and sustainable. So what's the oversight of understanding the impact? If you build a data center here, this is what it's going to mean for the environment.
Yeah, so obviously there are different environmental review processes in different jurisdictions. And the tech companies are saying that they do care a lot about the environmental impacts. Obviously, if they can cut down on energy use, on water use, it will also make their data centers cheaper. So all of the companies are working on ways to reduce water consumption. And I think what you see is that they are getting more efficient at this. But the problem is their need for capacity is growing so much faster than their ability to increase efficiency that overall it's going up.
This seems, well, my thoughts are going in a lot of different places right now, Joshua, but it seems like the type of problem that tech could solve.
Right, exactly.
Can't you create something that doesn't need to be cooled like a nuclear power plant core? Can't you create something that doesn't create as much heat? This seems like there's some brilliant person somewhere who's going to be able to do this, and it just hasn't happened yet. Am I being too optimistic?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a limit to how much you can get this down. I mean, these things are running computers. They use power. They create heat. You have to deal with that. And there are efforts to make these things more energy efficient. The question is, can they beat it's a race, basically. Yeah. Their capacity needs are growing up. They need to come up with better ways to do it, and like, who's going to get there first?
And it's not like the water gets run through this and then, it's just warm water on the other side. You talk about water just evaporating into the atmosphere as a result of this cooling process.
Yeah, that's a big way that the consumption happens, is actually the data centers use the water evaporates as a way to cool them down, and then the water is, effectively gone. Yeah. On site.
Tell us about the conversation. I want to take a step back because we often, when we talk with Jill Weber, the editor of the magazine, it's like, how does this story come to be? And how do you guys, what's the conversation in the newsroom that ultimately leads to what we are reading today? What was the germination of the story?
Yeah, well, obviously, this came out of Europe. There's been a lot of talk about the effects on drought and heat in Europe this summer.
Right.
And there is one large data center that I mentioned that Meta is planning in Spain. And because it's happening in an area that's really being hard hit, there's a lot of questions around that data center in particular. And when you look at that conflict, you quickly realize that this is a stand-in for a larger conflict that's happening in a lot of different places.
It's kind of amazing because or not amazing, because you understand governments, they want these facilities built, right? It typically means some economic impact, right? Or jobs created. And data centers, I guess, right? There's a fair amount of people in there.
Yeah, I think there's some question about how many jobs are created by data centers. Obviously, if you think about what a data center is,
it's a lot.
The whole idea is that it is running not with people, but just running computer servers.
But the construction of them takes local labor, and it creates tax revenue.
Absolutely, there is some economic impact here, and that's why people want them. And also, just sort of overall, I think tech is an economic driver, and this is a part of the infrastructure that has to be sited somewhere.
And you probably have to have the data center set right closer to kind of where some of the activity maybe is also happening. Can you take us to a photo The umbrellas. This is umbrellas in Spain. It's how you guys wrap up the story. But it's a canopy to protect locals, and it was kind of interesting in terms of, I guess, I don't know, to help the environment. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we were just trying to show like how panicked people are in this area and like how much people are trying to come up with ways to even deal with the activity that's already there. This is really straining everyone, and adding a data center is just an extra complication to the mix.
It still seems like to me there could be just better places for data centers in the world.
Like Norway?
Well, Norway has expensive energy, I think is what the article said. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joshua. But
lots of water.
But lots of water, exactly. Isn't there a place where there's lots of water and hydro? I mean, I think of the Bitcoin mining issue as well. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about the energy, and some would call it waste, some wouldn't. But there are places where you could co-locate these facilities that would have a better environmental impact, perhaps near renewable sources.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what people are looking for. And when you mentioned Bitcoin mining, so that's not even a related issue. That is the same issue. I mean, Bitcoin mining operations are data centers. So you want to locate, as you said, in places with large amounts of renewable energy. Oftentimes that is hydroelectricity. So those can be places where there's also plentiful water. But when you have a need for so many data centers and they need to be geographically spread out, you're going to end up going into a lot of places with different tensions.
I do feel like Europe's going to ultimately lead the way, like they do on so much in terms of oversight and regulation. So where does it go from here at this point? I mean, you guys are certainly putting it on the radar by writing this story, but I'm just curious. It hasn't been something we talk a ton about, and I just wonder when it becomes one of those things that lawmakers and policymakers globally are like, well, wait a minute, we got to think about this.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an issue that you'll be hearing about more as resources continue to be taxed more and more.
Yeah, especially with AI. Like, I love I don't know that I love it, but what it says about AI, that the chips that they use for AI generate lots and lots of more heat.
In the reporting for this story, I'm wondering if, and you were the editor on the story, but I'm wondering if we found that there are some governments that are so enthusiastic about this despite the environmental consequences. And we should note in the piece, it's not like these companies are coming in and advertising the fact that these are data centers. The authors write that these things just look like they could be warehouses. They look like any other huge building, industrial building.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that this is something that the companies that are building them are necessarily wanting to go in and make a big show of things. They're just trying to set these things up and quietly go about their business and maybe they really want to talk about more of the consumer-facing things that people might care about or even notice.
You know what's so interesting, too, is I was thinking a lot about Apple when I was reading this story. And a few years ago, Apple decided to, when the materials that go into phones, that go into chips, came under such scrutiny, the mining practices around those, Apple decided to make changes to the way it discloses its supply chain. And you can read all this on their website. But I haven't heard anything about data center usage and transparency there. Is that something we're going to see a demand for?
I think we're already seeing a demand for it. I think that came up in this story is what you see governments saying to tech companies is, well, you have to at least tell us more about how you're using water, just so at least we can plan for what you're doing. And obviously, once they see those stats, they may want to say, well, you've got to come up with a way to use less. And the first thing to do is just get the information.
Right, and carbon offsets don't do it.
Yeah,
it's like my big pet peeve as of late, because it doesn't, it just kind of...
Well, there is an interesting parallel to carbon offsets, which is that if we use this water, we will restore water. We will restore water somehow, and you run into a lot of the same issues where, well, where is it going to be restored? How's that going to work?
Exactly. No, it's like stop doing the bad stuff.
How do you restore water? Let's get some water restored to the Colorado River.
I just think for how long we've said carbon offsets, it's the answer to everything. It's like, no, stop doing the bad stuff, right? At this point. No, and I think about, again, there's just going to be more and more of these around the world. So you just think, okay, this is just going to become a much more serious problem, especially if you look at the summer we're having in terms of the weather, right? And the impact of that.
Absolutely.
All right. Great story.
So think twice about saving your photos to the cloud, Carol. You're just
you're
just not winning as a consumer. It's true.
No, it's if you think about like your footprint. This is part of it.
I just got a notice that I'm 85% full on Google storage. Thanks to
I'm like, hey, honey,
photos.
we need more cloud.
So gotta buy some more cloud.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Anyway, thank you so much for bringing us this story.
Absolutely, thank you.
We so appreciate it. Joshua Brustein, he is technology editor and oversees the tech section of Bloomberg Businessweek magazine. This story is in the new issue. It's coming out on newsstands tomorrow. It's already on the Bloomberg and, of course, at Bloomberg.com. But I feel like all the climate stuff that's coming out, like you're just getting different pieces about our impact on our world.
Yeah, and again, this is one of those things that you don't necessarily think about the environmental impact of what you're doing on your phone or what you're doing with your digital life and the real world impact that it has, because these things are not actual things, right? These photos are digital. They're not, and it's not just photos, right? It's like AI powered in the cloud.
It's everything. Can I ask you one thing? What did the companies say? Or is it just kind of like Amazon?
Well, what the companies say is, we know that climate change is real, we know it's a big deal, and we're working really hard to be more efficient at this, which I think is true.
Yeah.
They are trying to come up with ways to use less water and energy, but they're also coming up with ways to put AI into everything.
Is it only water, though, that does it? That cools it? Like at this point? Yeah?
Those are the main techniques, yeah.
So while we still have you, I do want to say that there's a really good way to quantify how much water is being used. And there's a team at the University of California, Riverside, and this is in the piece. Mm-hmm. They've calculated that every short conversation of 20 to 50 questions and answers with ChatGPT represents about 500 milliliters of water.
So stop doing it, Matt Miller. Stop talking with ChatGPT.
You're just asking fewer questions.
You're just watering the sidewalk when you do that. You're just pouring water out onto the cement.
Just stop it, everybody. Thank you. We really appreciate it. Joshua Brustein, as we said, technology editor at Bloomberg Businessweek. And of course, the new issue is coming out. Coming up, we've got a really treat for everyone. He's certainly a friend of the show. We're talking about Peter Atwater over at William & Mary, but former banker, someone who understands how Wall Street and the financial markets work and financial services works. And he's got a new book. It's about the confidence map. And you're going to have to draw a square.
I love this because it offers a framework for how to think about decision making, how to think about decisions that you make in your life. He made a really big decision when he was 45 and left financial services and decided to research confidence instead. And I think it's fair to say this book is the product of that sort of second act that he's had. Speaking
of decisions, we'll maybe ask him too a little bit about what he makes about the FOMC decision.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, see what he has to say, and then we'll kind of broaden it out. All right, you are listening and watching Bloomberg Businessweek. Carol Massar along with Tim Stenovec. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern. Listen on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
You talk about it. We all talk about it. A few certainties in life, right? Death taxes and the American healthcare system is, for lack of a better word, it's a mess.
Yeah.
Like disruption, innovation. Come on, come do something.
So remember, we have the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare.
Right.
Right? That's supposed to solve all of the problems for uninsured Americans. Well, guess what? In 2021, nearly 30 million people, more than 8% of the U.S. population, didn't have health insurance. That's according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Now, don't get me wrong. This is a lot better than things were in the decade leading up to the Affordable Care Act, when more than 15% of people did not have health insurance. But this is still millions of people who are at risk.
It's a lot of people in a very rich, or so we're told, wealthy country. So let's get to one of the co-authors, Amy Finkelstein. She is a professor of economics at MIT, director of the healthcare program at the National Bureau of Economic Research, and among other things, a 2018 MacArthur Fellow, and actually got a Genius Grant, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
I don't know if the geniuses are supposed to call them genius grants. That's for just us lay people, Carol.
We're going to call you a genius. We've been calling it, teasing you up. She is on Zoom in Cambridge on the MIT
Well, I got to tell you, it's going to take a genius to figure out healthcare in this country, so we're lucky to have you.
Help us, because, Tim and I talk with a lot of folks, and we talk about disruption, innovation. We've got the metaverse coming. We've got generative AI, all these wonderful things coming at us. And yet it still feels like, in some ways, healthcare is way behind the times. How do you see it? How do you think about it?
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on. I'd say, we didn't, my co-author Laurent and Av and I didn't go into this thinking about disruption, but we concluded that it was the only solution. And part of the reason is related to that fact that you started with, that 30 million Americans, or 1 in 10 Americans under 65, lack health insurance at any given moment. That gets talked about endlessly, but a really, really important statistic that gets very little coverage is the fact that more than twice as many Americans, in fact, 1 in 4 Americans under 65, will have some period of time without health insurance coverage over a 2-year period. In other words, health insurance, whose very purpose is to be secure and certain, is in fact highly uncertain. We all live, if we are lucky enough to have health insurance, with the risk of losing that coverage.
Is that because it's tied to our jobs?
For people with employer-provided health insurance, that about half of the population that has that, yes. For people with publicly provided health insurance, the risk is, like Medicaid or Medicare for certain diseases, the risk is you can lose your coverage if your income changes, or you get older, or you have a disease-specific coverage program and you get cured of that disease, or, and this is kind of the most heartbreaking part, or you can simply lose your coverage because you failed to realize that you needed to file forms to demonstrate that you're still eligible under some income category. And that's why we realized further patches and incremental reform won't work. We have to tear this down and start over, because whenever you have different pathways to eligibility and coverage through a myriad of programs, you're going to have gaps at the seams, and that's where people are falling through.
All right, so Professor Finkelstein, if you could wave your magic wand and change one thing that you think would be a game changer in terms of improving healthcare in the United States, what would it be? I'm just curious, who would you wave the magic wand over? Is it the health insurers? Is it politicians? Is it what?
To fix our coverage problem, we need automatic, universal, basic coverage that's free for everyone, no patient payments. And then the option to buy supplemental coverage if you want more than the basic.
This sounds, forgive me, I'm not 65, but my parents are over 65, and this sounds like Medicare.
It may sound like Medicare, it's not. Here's one very important difference, and that I think a lot of the proponents of Medicare for all don't realize, that Medicare for some is actually very, very incomplete insurance. So for example, for doctor visits, people have to pay 20% of the doctor bill out of their own pocket with no limit, no cap. So you can, if you're unfortunate enough to be quite ill, you have cancer, say, and you rack up lots of physician visits and bills, you can be on the hook for tens of thousands of dollars that you have to pay despite having coverage. A startling fact is not only that there's enormous amounts of medical debt in the United States, but that 3/5 of that is incurred by people who have health insurance. So in that sense, our plan would be much better than the current Medicare plan. There'd be no risk of having to pay anything out of pocket. On the other hand, because we are realists, at least in terms of the economics, we have that coverage be much more basic than the current Medicare coverage. People are so concerned about Medicare costs growing so fast and going through the roof. One reason they do that is because there's no budget constraint on the system. Patients want care, physicians are willing to provide it. There's no gatekeeper on the back end saying, no, maybe we need to check to make sure you really need that CT scan because you came in with a headache. So we would have much more constraints on the nature of the care that's provided, but anything that was provided would be completely free.
So how do we help, you know where that gets to, like people making decisions about who gets what? Like, how do we make sure that is done in a pure way?
That's a good question. So the first thing I want to emphasize is that the whole point of a universal basic health insurance system is to fulfill the social commitment that we clearly have, and that's revealed by all our patchwork policies, to provide essential medical care when people are ill, regardless of their ability to pay for it. And so the basic coverage has to cover what's medically essential, but it doesn't have to cover things that we all might like, but that aren't actually essential medical care, such as, so you can have longer wait times for non-urgent care. You can have fewer amenities, the non-medical part, like more people to a hospital room, and this is what other countries do. Countries like Singapore or Australia, they provide universal basic coverage, but if you want a private hospital room or good hospital food, that's what you pay extra for.
I will say, there was one point my husband got ill over in the UK, and we were initially in, I guess, their public system, and
the NHS, right?
And yes,
yeah, NHS,
and it was a ton of people in a room, and you had to get up to get your own food. It wasn't great, I'm going to be quite honest. And he was with an employer who pulled him out and put him over to a hospital that was like a nice hotel and, got a bunch of tests that they could do as soon as he walked in. Although we've had to see the finance person, that was the first person we saw to make sure that it was going to be paid for. Like, it was just such a contrast. And I guess so I'm trying to understand, how we move forward and get to something where more people are getting better care. And I'm wondering, how do we pay for all of this?
So I think those are related questions. The example we give in the book is, how do we fulfill our obligations, but without, all the extra stuff. So your husband's example is a perfect one. I can totally understand why you liked going outside of the system more. You had, a private room, more convenience, etc. But I think our commitment as a society is not to provide everyone with luxury, high-end medical care, such as your husband was fortunate to receive, but to provide essential medical care. And that's also how we keep the price down. So if you are fortunate enough to be able to afford it and you want to buy those extra amenities, that's great, but that's not what we're committed to as a society. We're not committed to providing a luxury experience. We're committed to providing essential medical care. And as we discuss in the book, that's also how we keep the price tag down.
Great. And I certainly wasn't arguing in favor of the other, because he wasn't fixed. He was basically just fixed enough to get on a plane and come back home to the United States. But it was just such a contrast, and I was trying to get my head around, like, how do we figure this out? Professor Finkelstein, don't go anywhere. We want to continue this conversation. We are talking with Amy Finkelstein. She is a co-author of a new book. It's called We've Got You Covered, Rebooting American Healthcare, professor of economics at MIT, and director of healthcare program at the National Bureau of Economic Research. I mean, really is coming at this from just checking all the boxes of someone, I think, who needs to understand how to fix this.
She's at the NBER. I wonder if she can tell us if there's a recession.
That's our next question. Carol Massar, along with Tim Stenovec, here on Bloomberg Businessweek. And we want to get back to Amy Finkelstein. She's co-author of We've Got You Covered, Rebooting American Healthcare, professor of economics at MIT, director of the healthcare program at the National Bureau of Economic Research, and as we mentioned earlier, a 2018 MacArthur Fellow on Zoom in Cambridge. So do you know, is it a recession? Is a recession coming?
I'm not that kind of economist.
We had a great Bloomberg story a few months ago, Amy, and the group of folks at the NBER were described as eggheads, who are the ones who decide whether or not we're in a recession. So I guess we'll have to go to you for how we fix American healthcare.
Yeah, I'm just the egghead on healthcare.
Hey, that's good enough for us. We appreciate that. What is the one country that is doing this the best?
Every high-income country but the U.S. is doing it much better than we are. None of them are doing it exactly as we propose. So
which one is closest?
Not a fair question. We're like some of them in some dimensions and like others on others. What I can say that every other high-income country is doing, which is what we propose, is automatic universal basic coverage and the option to supplement or top it up if you want more. And the third element, which is really key, a budget that is enforced in terms of how much can be spent by the taxpayer on healthcare. One thing that's shocking about the U.S. system is there is no healthcare budget in the sense of what a budget really means, a budget constraint, an amount that you can't spend beyond. When people talk about the Medicare budget, they mean how much Medicare has spent or will spend, not the cap on how much it can spend. So we need to enforce a budget and use that taxpayer money that we've allocated to provide universal basic coverage. Now, you asked which country we're like. Well, in one dimension, we're very much like the UK and Canada in having absolutely no patient co-pays in the basic coverage. No, patients don't have to pay anything out of pocket. On the other hand, in terms of the design of the supplemental coverage, we very much don't want to do it the way the UK does it, but we want to do it the way, say, Singapore or Australia do it, where you can just pay the extra cost to top up, like upgrading, to business class. You don't have to repurchase the entire ticket to get a little extra legroom. You just pay for the additional cost.
But doesn't that create, again, inequities? Because obviously not everybody can upspend, if you will.
Absolutely. we see the key mission of healthcare policy to make sure that everyone has access to essential medical care regardless of resources. And beyond that, we tolerate inequality in the supplemental in the same way we tolerate inequality in other aspects of our society, housing, food, etc. Our proposal is about a floor, not a ceiling. And one thing that's really important to understand, because I know that makes a lot of people uncomfortable, because however we feel about inequality in, say, clothing, many people feel rightly that health is different, that it occupies a sort of special place in our moral firmament. One of the things we make very clear in the book is that there's an enormous body of research that makes it clear that, as counterintuitive as it may seem, if you're concerned, and you should be, about the shocking health disparities that exist in the United States between high and low income, between black and white, health insurance policy is simply not the lever to lean on. Health insurance reform would have little effect on those health disparities. And probably the clearest way to see that is from work that some economists have done, Ichin Chen, Maria Polyakova, and Petra Persson, who show that in a country like Sweden, and there's other work showing this in Norway, despite universal health insurance and cradle-to-the-grave social safety net, the health inequality across the income distribution is as large in say, Sweden as it is in the United States.
Wow, that's surprising to hear. So if you look, I have two questions for you. One, yes or no, but you can also tell me it's not a fair question. Do doctors in the U.S. make too much money?
It's not relevant to our proposal. So
that's my next question. When you look at the value chain across patient access, and you hear this stat thrown around all the time that a fifth of our GDP goes to healthcare costs. Where is that money going? Who is getting that money who doesn't deserve it?
One of the key things about our proposal is to realize that you can separate the question of how do we make sure that everyone has access to essential medical care regardless of resources from the very hard questions that you're raising about how to fix healthcare spending, how to make sure that we can spend less and still achieve good outcomes. The coverage problem turns out to be a really easy one. As I said, basically every other high-income country has done it. The question you're asking, which is a good question, is one that no one knows the answer to. And I don't care what they're claiming. It's a very, very hard problem. But the way we can afford it is to realize that, yes, that statistic you said is right. We spend twice as much as any other country on healthcare, a fifth of our economy as a share of the economy, but only half of that is publicly funded. So taxpayer dollars in the U.S. are not more than in other countries. We're already paying for universal coverage through the tax system. We're just not getting it.
All right. So just got about a minute left here. So forgive me, and I'm just maybe a little brain dead. But I mean, so what's the step one towards what you are talking about? What would we have to change? What is it?
We'd have to completely tear down the current system and build, system in quotations, the current patchwork of policies we have in place, and actually design and build a coherent, automatic, universal basic
But how does that start? Is it politics? Is it politicians? Is it the private sector? How do we start?
It's public policy. So yes, we need to. We're waiting for the first would-be presidential candidate to sign on board for our plan. The book just came out today, so I'm willing to give it a week or two.
I guess and listen, I wish we had more time because this is a really, I think, difficult. I always feel like healthcare and education, these are the two things that really need some disruption to happen in. But healthcare, I feel like there's so much money in it, that it complicates it. Is that fair? Totally. I just got about 15 seconds. It complicates it, right?
It does. But once we agree on the solution, then we can start trying to figure out how to achieve it.
I got to say, I love a book that says more than 50 shades of gray, but it has to do with what's going to be considered, kind of basic coverage, right? What things go? Fertility treatments?
Is it basic?
I don't know. Physical therapy? Anyway, Amy Finkelstein, incredible. Check out the book, everybody.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern. Listen on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
All right, we're going to talk a little bit about those who work specifically at Amazon, their fulfillment centers, because it is a subject of a story that's in the upcoming new issue of Bloomberg Businessweek. And you got to keep in mind that coming up this month, there are hearings into Amazon's labor practices in Washington state, just the beginning of a widening government crackdown on the company's safety record that I guess many would argue, Matt, that they are the most intrusive scrutiny in the company's history. That is the investigation into them.
So you mean that they were monitoring these employees with cameras and electronic devices, really watching what they were doing to see how difficult a job it can be at an Amazon fulfillment center. Sounds like such a...
We're fulfilling
I'm trashing that term. Come on, it's a warehouse.
It's all marketing.
Right?
It's all marketing, kiddo. Democratization, right? Of finances. All right, so let's get to the two reporters who wrote it. This story, as we said, featured in the upcoming new issue of Bloomberg Businessweek on newsstands later this week, already online at Bloomberg.com/Businessweek, and of course on the Bloomberg terminal. So let's get to it with Bloomberg News technology and e-commerce reporter Spencer Soper on the phone in Seattle, and Josh Idelson, labor reporter at Bloomberg News on Zoom in San Francisco. Spencer, let me kick it off with you, because you take us back, you kick off the story and take us to December 2021. Tell us a little bit about what was going on.
Yeah, so that's when state inspectors, and so these would be people with Washington State Department of Labor and Industry, based on some concerns, including media reports about warehouse injuries, as well as the injury rate at the facility itself, entered and looked around. And in a usual investigation, they'll bring cameras and survey the workplace. And ordinarily, these things don't even escalate to this point of contention. It's more like a cooperative thing where an employer wants to know how to solve injuries. But in this case, they actually had a court order to enter the warehouse in Amazon's home state of Washington, use electronic devices to put on workers and measure all kinds of things, like how frequently they stoop and bend and twist, and calculate, the rates that they're performing lifts every minute or every hour, and basically just surveying this workplace for ergonomic risk, because they're trying to find out and answer questions. What can be done? There's a high level of injury in this workplace. What can we do to make it safer?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in a lot of car factories, and you'll always see signs that say, 16 days without an injury, right? And they count higher and higher. But at Amazon warehouses, nearly 100 people are injured every single day.
It's a lot.
And Josh, it doesn't make much sense to me from the business perspective. Don't they want to keep their staff from getting injured? Because if you hurt yourself on the job, then you're out. Not for like a day or two, but for a month or two.
Well, Amazon, of course, says that they are working hard to prevent their staff from being injured. We talked to people, including one of the ergonomists from the state of Washington who's testifying in this proceeding, and a warehouse safety equipment makers director, who argue that there are things the company could be doing and is not doing. And as you say, that those would save the company money. It costs money to have people out injured. It costs money to bring in new employees. Now, the measures that are being urged by Washington State would also cost the company money, both because of operational changes and because fundamentally this case in Washington State is partly about the pace of work, an issue that has dogged Amazon for years now, this question of how much the company expects workers to do in an hour and how that expectation impacts the likelihood of getting hurt.
Well, this goes to the core, right? Their business model is really on trial, is what you guys report about. And Spencer, I mean, so much we talk about all the time, we've all gotten used to. I order and I get it the next day, or I get it in 2 days. Like, we just all expect that. But that puts a lot of pressure, right, on Amazon workers to really churn stuff out.
Yeah, and so there's a variety of jobs and tasks, right? And Amazon, it's tough to get them to pin down a specific quota, because they say it kind of moves around depending on how people are performing in their own operations and stuff. But what's coming out and what Amazon is acknowledging is saying, listen, if someone's in our warehouse performing a job and their pace of work is, below 95% of what their peers are doing, that, that's the only thing that's going to trigger them getting spoken to. And what the state is saying is like, listen, that's a little bit too tight of a work expectation, because you have pretty broad difference in the physical capabilities and the stamina of a workforce. That's going to range from kids fresh out of high school, to people in their 50s and 60s. So it's basically their operation is on trial, and the main question is it safe? And if the answer to that is no, how can it be made more safe?
Well, and they found that they're not safe in a lot of these cases, right? And by the way, they use extremely high-tech gear to monitor the workers. I guess they have a Dutch company, Xsense Technology, that makes these motion sensors that they were putting on Amazon employees' arms or legs or whatever. I thought they were going to start using gear like that to help these workers do their jobs. Like 10 years ago, I did a piece about robotics that would help.
The automation, right?
Yeah. Josh, do they not have this kind of tech? Or Spencer, I mean, is Amazon putting any, mechanical helpers in place? I don't know which one of you is a better person to ask for these questions. All right, Josh, I'll go with you.
I would defer to Spencer on what the.
Okay, we'll go with Spencer. Spencer,
I can answer that. And so, yes, there's a lot of automation within Amazon warehouses, and a lot of it is just focused on pushing product through the facility as quickly as possible. They have robots that shuffle things around. You're a worker, you might be, if you're a picker, which is someone who's actually, you ordered a toothbrush on Amazon, I'm a picker, I'm going to be the one who actually retrieves that from a bin. A robot will bring that bin to me, and I will retrieve that item that you've ordered. So there are robots and automation in there, but there's still extra things, and some of it is very simple. So the hearings actually began today, and I've been watching them, and one thing coming up is, hey, they've got step ladders which help people if they're going to minimize reaching over your head, which is a very serious hazard if you're reaching high above your head to grab a box. But the step ladders they're using aren't tall enough. They need to be taller. So some of these things aren't high tech at all, fairly simple solutions, and also just rotating workers through different jobs. And the state inspector who was testifying today said he found no schedule of an actual rotation, and that it just seemed to be kind of willy-nilly. So again, it's not necessarily high-tech solutions. Some of them require investment, but some are pretty simple things like step ladders and shifting people through different roles.
Well, and you get into some of the different roles: destuffers, fluid loaders, those who place outbound packages onto trucks, destuffers who unload boxes from trucks. I mean, some of this is repetitive. It's probably pretty heavy. With
mandatory overtime, by the way. Don't forget, right, that these are not 8-hour
No, right.
jobs.
They might go really long. What I want to ask you, though, Josh, is has the law not kept up with kind of the way how we work has evolved? I mean, first of all, we've had assembly lines for a long time. This is a different type of assembly line, if you will. But I'm just wondering what the law has said, labor law.
Well, one of the things that's interesting about this case is in several decades, it's one of the only times that there's a trial about ergonomic issues. And there is no really specific federal ergonomic standard, which is not something no one has thought of. In fact, there were efforts in parallel a couple decades ago in Washington state and at the federal level. There were what would have been ergonomic rules put in place, which then were swept away quickly because at the federal level, when George W. Bush won the 2000 election, the Republicans in Congress and President Bush used the Congressional Review Act to undo Clinton's new ergonomic rules. And meanwhile, in Washington state, there was actually a voter referendum to undo ergonomics rules. That means that instead, at the state and federal level, the enforcers are stuck using what's called the general duty clause in federal law, which is a more general requirement that the employer avoid hazards that are known and could cause serious harm. Of course, there's tremendous debate about what would count as such a violation. And we're going to see that play out in Washington State in this trial over the coming days.
You know, it's interesting. They had one of the senators quoted in the story says that I think it was a she, is one of those people who loves getting her box the next day, right?
Right.
And now she feels guilty. But that's still achievable, it would seem to me. You just don't make one person, pack 200 boxes, for 12 hours a day. So, Spencer, did you look at that? Like, if it's possible for Amazon to still achieve the same end with just, maybe more employees or more centers, or is the only answer to slow things down a little bit?
Yeah, it's a critical question, and I don't know, because the bottom line is Amazon basically has made, think about this. You used to drive to the store yourself. You used to walk yourself to the aisle to get the item you needed. You would walk that aisle to a cash register. You would pay someone for that item. You would drive it home, right? So basically, stores were kind of meeting you halfway to get you the product. Amazon is doing, all of that, saving you that trip to the store. They're using, another worker, paying them gas, paying the gas for the vehicle, the trip to your house, all that stuff, and doing it at a price that's competitive of you going to a store. That's very difficult to pull off. And if you start turning knobs and increasing costs, this thing could unravel.
Yep.
So that is the critical question. Can this business be done in a way that is comparable to going to the store at the same cost, or is it more of like a boutique service that you're going to have to pay a little extra for because the cost of doing it safely is higher?
Hey, real quickly, Josh, how quickly or how long is this trial expected to last? Just got about 25 seconds.
So the trial will be going on for weeks, and then there is a potential appeals process that could drag this on far into the future.
All right, so we'll be talking about it for a while. All right, guys, thank you so much. Bloomberg News technology and e-commerce reporter Spencer Soper joining us on the phone in Seattle. Josh Idelson, labor reporter at Bloomberg News on Zoom in San Francisco. As we said, this story in the upcoming new issue of Bloomberg Businessweek. I do wonder, Matt, do they have to rethink their business model and start to say, well, maybe it's going to take long. What?
Or should we pay more if we want, instant fulfillment?
We used to do that. Think about if you wanted something right away or overnight, you would have to pay a company. You still do.
Yeah, I think you do more and more often. I was just ordering, for example, Cricket shirts out of Austin, Texas.
Yeah,
and they have a more normal, it takes a week or two for the shirts to get to you. If you want them faster, you pay an extra $20 or $30. And I think a lot more companies are going back to that rather than promising you next day delivery for
right.
nothing.
Maybe we all just have to manage our expectations and not have to have everything the next day. All right, this is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business App, and YouTube. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plenty ahead in our second hour of the weekend edition of Bloomberg Business Week, including fun with the maker of Ken and Barbie. Mattel CEO Ynon cries on the movie, the toy business, and losing a top exec. Plus, a classically trained French chef who is big time into the vegetarian space, including plant-based seafood. We talk with the founder of Conscious Foods. Also joining us, Laura Ray Dickey. She's the CEO of the more than 80-year-old family-run franchise, Dickey's Barbecue Restaurants. First up this hour, Mattel reported sales and profit that beat analyst expectations, but it didn't get much help from Barbie, the fashion doll that was the focus of the top movie in the world last weekend. Those earnings came out late Wednesday, just hours after we got word that Richard Dixon, the Mattel chief operating officer who oversaw a recent Barbie turnaround, will become CEO of The Gap next month. With more on all things Mattel, we were delighted to have back with us Ynon Kreiz, chairman and CEO of Mattel. First of all, congratulations on Barbie, because we have been talking about that with you for a while. I almost feel like since the beginning, and your strategy of bringing Mattel toys to life. What does the success of the movie mean to you and the company?
Yes, that's right, Carol, and thank you for having me on the show. As you remember from the very beginning, this was never about just making a movie. This was about creating a cultural event, a societal moment. And we could not be happier where we are today with such strong performance right out of the gate, the first week, with over $500 million in gross in box office receipts. And more importantly, the audience reaction, with people going 2 and even 3 times already in the first week to see the movie. Very broad audience, including men, and a very strong performance internationally that is stronger than the U.S. And it's not because the U.S. is not doing well. It's just a very strong performance across the world. And all in all, it really is, an exciting moment and a showcase for the cultural resonance of our brands, our ability to attract and collaborate with top creative talent, and our marketing and demand creation capabilities to create what is now, a cultural phenomenon.
What does it mean for merchandise? I mean, I've actually bought some Barbie products, to be quite honest. I grew up with Barbies, introduced them to my daughter. My older sisters introduced me to them, and it's nostalgic for me. But I also have been in the stores where all ages are snapping up products. How does that move the needle for you guys financially as well? All those deals.
Yeah, we did see incredible take-up of the movie-related merchandise. We have more than 165 different consumer product partners, different industry, different products all over the world, and we're seeing incredible excitement. And as you say, product is selling out quickly. This is movie-related merchandise.
Does it financially have a financial material impact on you guys?
Well, we haven't broken it out, but this is already part of what we expect will be an uplift in Barbie sales in the second half. This is really where it kicked in. And of course, don't forget the halo effect on the overall Barbie brand with a significant improvement in consumer demand already in the third quarter, and expect Barbie to grow in the third quarter and for the full year.
Ynon, you called it a cultural moment, and certainly that means that it can polarize some people, at least here in the United States. Got to ask about the high-profile people on the right who've criticized the film. Ben Shapiro made this 40-minute YouTube video. It's been viewed nearly 2 million times. He says he destroys the movie. He actually burns Barbies in it. Elon Musk says if you take a shot every time Barbie says the word patriarchy, you'll pass out before the movie ends. How do you react to that criticism?
Look, Barbie has been a flag carrier for diversity and inclusivity. Barbie inspired the limitless potential in every girl. And the genius of Greta is what she did. She took this message, that focuses on female empowerment, and made this movie appealing and relevant to everyone. And people who go to the movie, whether you're a Barbie fan or looking to be entertained and inspired by a modern day interpretation of one of the most iconic brands in modern culture, this movie will be an experience for you. And what we believe is this movie will recontextualize the way people think of Barbie and what Barbie means for the world. And we could not be more proud of the messages and the unique voice that Greta has in this movie.
Well, and I'm curious, too, does it mean that we're going to see a Barbie sequel? Or is it a case of you guys move on to other toys?
We haven't announced a sequel, and, we're still barely a week into the release. But
you know how we journalists are. We're like, okay, now what?
What's next?
No, you're not alone. You're not alone in asking the question. But, of course, with such a success, such a phenomenal success, of course, we'd be looking to extend this. And we've always said that our goal is not, this is broadly not just about Barbie, is we're not looking to create single movies, but to build film franchises for the long term. And of course, this is part of our strategy in terms of capturing the full value from our intellectual properties.
Ynon, does that intellectual property, be it in movies or streaming series or what have you, how you guys, whichever ways you go, does that ultimately become a big generator of revenues.
Yeah, we absolutely said that our strategy in capturing the full value of our IP outside the toy aisle can be meaningful in success, and we're looking to scale this. This is not just about a movie or a TV series. This is about participating in highly accretive business verticals outside the toy aisle that are all driven by big franchises, big brands, and in some cases, these verticals are larger than the toy industry. So we believe that we have the assets, the capabilities, the relationship, and with the Barbie movie, this really positions us in a very strong way as a key player that can participate in these verticals and create meaningful shareholder value and build a meaningful business out of this.
Ynon, it's like Carol said, this has been a busy week for you. Got to ask about the big news yesterday, the co-president and COO, Richard Dickson, moving on to be CEO of The Gap. Let's get your comments on that. How big of a loss is this for the company?
Richard is a friend and has been a great colleague and partner for me since I joined the company. But one of Richard's biggest accomplishments is that we built a very, very strong team of leaders, of designers, of innovators, of creative talent within the company. And the executives who take over from Richard, between Lisa McKnight, who has been the head of Barbie since 2016 and very much managed the transformation together with Richard.
Right.
And the head of Dolls in 2019, and Josh Silverman, who has been at Disney for 20 years. Yeah. That is now where he oversaw all of Disney's third-party relationships with licensees. Now running our non-toy commercial activity.
So you're not worried.
Two world-class leaders really taking charge, and we could not be more confident of our team that is running this business.
Ynon, 10 seconds, got to be quick. Did you give tips to Will Ferrell on playing a CEO of Mattel?
I can learn a lot from him on the comedy side, but I'm a big fan, and it's great to see him playing the role.
Well, congratulations, and we're looking forward to following more of this story and what comes next. Ynon Kreiz, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer at Mattel, on the phone from El Segundo, California. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern. Listen on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, and the Bloomberg Business App. Or watch us live on YouTube.
We're going to talk about something different right now. We have a really cool guest.
Or the same, depending on your pet.
That's true. He has bicycled more than 3,400 miles from Montreal to the Pacific Ocean, classically trained French chef. He has founded a couple of food companies. He has sold them. He has spent more than 3 decades thinking about the vegetarian food world, creating everything from a veggie hot dog and more, Matt. So he knows the space.
All right, I'm very interested to hear about this because I would love to be a vegetarian if I could. The way we treat, especially factory farmed, which is almost all of our animals from cows to chickens, is disgusting.
Yeah, the process is
on the other
nice
hand, meat is so yummy and it's packed with protein, right?
Also yummy is seafood, and he's now got a new venture involving vegan seafood. It's known as Conscious Foods. So with us is Chef Yves Potvin. He's president and founder of Gardein. I believe I'm saying it hopefully correctly. And Conscious Foods with us on Zoom from Vancouver, British Columbia. And forgive me if I've mispronounced. I studied a lot of Spanish, not a lot of French.
But it's a famous name here in New York, Potvin,
Yes, it is. It is. That is true.
Right.
Welcome. Tell us a little bit about yourself, because you have done some really interesting stuff, and you've really spent a lot of time on, the vegetarian world and the plant-based food world. How come?
Well, Matt, I'm like you. I'm a flexitarian. So, I believe there's you should always try to make a contribution for a better world, and so I was, like you said, classically a trained chef, and somehow I fumbled into the plant-based business. And for the last over 30 years, I've been developing different brands, and very excited to present Conscious with a K today. So we're a new innovative brand, and we're on a mission to change the way that people eat by providing a line of frozen sushi, onigiri, and poke bowl that this is close to my heart, that it tastes good first. And it's good for the people, good for the planet. And we're so excited to launch nationwide with whole food this week.
I mean, it's, I think, an issue that's close to our hearts as well. Carol and I are both scuba divers, and we've all seen the problems. Well, all of us that have been underwater have seen the problems that giant fishing expeditions create, and then for a while I thought, okay, well, factory farmed salmon, that must be a better alternative. Turns out it really isn't, because they don't do a good job of raising those fish either. But the taste has been a problem for me. I've only tried artificial, plant-based like beef burgers, like Impossible Burger, or what's the other one?
Beyond
Meat. I couldn't really stomach either one of them. So how do you overcome that problem?
And that's why I'm so excited to be here and talking to you, Matt and Carol, because evidently you are conscious. You are aware of your environment. And the way the younger population today, they vote with their mouth. And they say, well, I want a better future, so it has to be something that tastes good and is good for the environment. And another thing that we're excited about conscious is that we have price parity. So a lot of the company that you mentioned before, I think there's something like 20% of the population that would like to incorporate plant-based protein in their diet, but they say it's too expensive. Well, we're the first, I think, of this new generation innovative brand that it's price parity. It's not more expensive than the traditional protein. So, but because of my chef background, it has to taste good. And consumer now, they're looking for sustainable choice that are affordable. And so you can go to Whole Food and buy a California roll, a Japanese curry onigiri, or a salmon poke bowl, and it's going to cost you $7.99 or $8.99. You don't have to break the bank to eat consciously now.
I guess the one thing, too, I will go back to is things like Impossible and Beyond Meat. What I had a problem with, Eve, is that there was a lot of sodium in them. And to me, that wasn't I think of plant-based proteins and I think healthier and less impact on the environment. Like it has to tick off a bunch of boxes for me in order, and it has to taste good. So tell us about the nutritional value or some of the metrics, so that if I turn over the box, what am I going to see when it comes to sodium or what have you?
By the way, that's a lot of boxes. It has to tick better for the environment.
Yep.
It has to cost the same or around the same, right? It's got to taste good.
Yep.
And it's got to be good for you, because obviously, Eve, there's a lot of protein in meat and it's not packed with salt, as Carol says.
Yes, totally right. And so we are looking at, and Matt, you're totally right. In our lifetime, we know that somewhere in the next 20, 30 years, we're going to drive electric car or any other form of car that is not fueled by petroleum. But it's the same thing in our life. We know most of the fish we're going to eat is going to be farm raised. And a lot of salmon on the market right now, it's artificial color, artificial flavor, etc. So we're on a mission to change the way we eat. I said earlier, it's because we have a third of the sodium of traditional sushi that you eat in the supermarket. We have less fat, and we have ingredients that are easily recognizable. So our tuna, as first ingredients, is organic tomato. The second one is konjac. Konjac is a root vegetable that has tremendous dietary fiber, and it's good for you. So yes, there's many boxes that the customer is looking. First of all is the price. Well, we take care of that one. Nutritional, we have about half of the protein right now that salmon or tuna has. But it's okay. Most people don't buy just because of the protein. They buy because of the whole package. But we are working very closely to trying to increase the level of protein. No artificial ingredient, non-GMO, organic ingredient, etc. So I think we've done a good job at putting the package. But most important, it's convenient. Like my wife likes to say, frozen to yummy in 5 minutes. So, and people ask me that, why do you need frozen sushi? Well, there's 20,000 a sushi restaurant in North America, there's a need for it to have it in your freezer.
Eve, but something like salmon, right? I go for it because of the omega-3 fatty acids, right? That's good for me. And I would rather, kind of grew up in a family, everything in moderation, and better to eat as true to how it is grown or cultivated, hopefully, and do less of it. So do I get that benefit?
You do. We have omega-3 comes from different sources. One of them is the fish oil, but it's also vegetable oil that we incorporate in our product that has the same level as omega-3 that you have in traditional fish.
Interesting. Really interesting. Are you convinced?
I'm convinced. I'll tell you what, I'm convinced enough. We have a Whole Foods right down here.
You're going to try
on 3rd and 57th. I'll walk down there and get some for sure.
Yeah, and try it.
Fantastic. Just follow the instruction. There are 3 easy ways to prepare it. Microwave 1 minute. If you don't like microwave, you can put the patent pending packaging in hot water for 8 minutes, or you could leave it at room temperature and it's ready for lunch.
We're talking with Yves Potvin, president and founder of Conscious Foods, on Zoom from Vancouver, British Columbia. Hey, Yves, one thing I wanted to ask you, Matt and I talk a lot about food and just the way we produce things and trying to feed this world. And a lot of the ways that we do it are not great for the environment. There's also a lot of food waste. And there's an interesting Bloomberg opinion columnist that talks about big food should be ESG's next target, basically just going after the ultra processed food makers.
Should be ESG's first target. Should have been ESG's first target. Because if you want to stop carbon emissions,
right,
you got to go after the beef industry, even before you go after the internal combustion engine.
So how do you think about all of this? You've been working in the food industry for a long time. How do you think about it, and what is a better way forward?
Well, it's about diversity. Last year, August, we reached a milestone of 8 billion in population. We know that, and that was one of the reasons, I have a younger daughter. When she was born, not that long ago, 25 years ago, the population was 3.7 billion. Now we're at 8 and we're going to be at 10 billion. So, and that was my idea. And I said, it makes a lot of sense. We know, I think in Vancouver, salmon reached the price of $30 a pound this summer. So traditional protein is going to go higher and higher in price. So why not diversify the protein and use the plant-based, and the question is having manufacturer and processor like me, innovator that takes those protein, the pea protein, all the different sorts of protein, put it in a way, in a form and in a shape that people are accustomed to, because people won't start feeding themselves lentil and chickpea and a thing like this. It's too complicated. So that's what we do. We use traditional sushi, and we make our own snow crab, our own tuna, our own salmon. And I'm really excited for you, Matt, to go try it, because you're going to say, wow, this tastes great. And I feel very proud about what we accomplished. And I think the world is changing. The younger population is voting with their mouth. And I think it's a question of using all our source of protein. That is what we're going to find a solution, not just beef, not just seafood, but using the protein from a variety of sorts. Seaweed is a fantastic source of protein.
All right. So, the sushi, it's packed full of protein. What's the protein and the calorie value of that sushi, those California rolls?
Calories about 350 calories for 8 coin. And it's about, traditional sushi is about 8% protein. This is about 4%. So, but most people don't go to the sushi and say, I'm eating there because of protein.
Of course not,
protein.
Yeah.
Most people have too much protein in their diet. That's the reality. So I think it's more about nutrition, what you bring nutrition. And I think our product is packed of nutrition. We have all the vitamin D, A, B, etc. that your body needs. So, but most important is what we're offering is convenience. You can have sushi, onigiri, poke bowl at lunch, dinner, snack, have a party with your friend. So having the product available in your freezer and ready in 5 minutes. And it's about giving a choice to the consumer that whenever you want, you can have a product that you like. Like I said earlier, 20,000 sushi, 5,000 poke bowl restaurant, there's a market for it.
So Yves, as demand, let's assume that this takes off, and as demand picks up, can you keep it at the cost level that you have now? Or will, just like with kind of regular food, it just feels like, as you said, the growing population, like demand just has gotten out of control. And as the developed world has a much more, the developing world has more of a developed diet, like, right, there's more demand of that traditional food thing. So the cost, I'm just curious about the process and the cost as demand ramps up.
What are the main inputs? Peas?
Well, the rice comes from California. All our vegetables are from British Columbia. So we're trying to buy local as possible, but we have a 34,000 square feet facility in Vancouver over here. We can produce 4,000 roll an hour. So that's a fair amount of volume, but our plan is to open a factory or a processing facility in the US, one in Asia and one in Europe. So your question, Carol, is more about ingredient. Has you increased the demand?
Right.
Well, the beauty with root vegetable is you can grow more. I'm not anti-beef, I'm not anti-fish, but it's not a logical way to grow your protein. It takes 18 months to raise a cattle, and half of the, you feed it more than what you get at the end. So versus the plant-based protein, that's why it makes so much sense.
Even with climate change making it sometimes more problematic or difficult?
Depend what you're growing, Carol. You see, if you're growing more corn or more wheat or more soy, but there's a lot of places in Asia, for example, that's where the root vegetable conscious, it's all over Asia. But rice, there's lots of room to grow rice. And you need to eat something. At one point people asked me why in my previous business, why are you using wheat or soy, etc. Well, I said, I don't use milk, I don't use dairy, I don't use egg. You need to eat food, something. You can't just live with water and air. And I think the food we grow, the food we use at Conscious is very good. And yes, it's sustainable.
Interesting.
All right, we're going to leave it on that note. Really, really fascinating. And I do feel like more and more we continue to see the food space slowly being disrupted, if you will.
Yeah. Well,
right?
And I also, the deeper I look into it, the more problems I have with the way our food is produced or farmed or caught. And as I said, salmon's one of the biggest conundrums because I don't want to support industrial fishing and I don't want to support the factory farming of salmon, but I love salmon.
There was just a story, did you see it in the New York Times, about the fate of Alaska's king salmon and starving orcas? The orcas don't have enough food, and so they're trying to figure out what to do, and they're thinking about maybe that we have to stop fishing them, but then you've got, folks that rely on it for their livelihood.
And you can't. They won't stop.
Oh, I don't know. It's just tricky. Yves, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Yves Potvin, hopefully you'll come back soon and give us an update on the business. President and founder of Conscious Foods, joining us on Zoom from Vancouver, British Columbia.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Businessweek podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business App, and YouTube. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
So we're going to take a little bit of a break from earnings, from Fed talk, from yield curves, and because it's summer, we're going to talk some barbecue. You okay with that?
Well, it's not just like a summer fun session, right? Because this actually is very closely connected to markets, to inflation, to the Fed,
costs.
Because the costs have been soaring.
I just said we were going to take a break.
Okay.
Gosh.
Okay.
Can you just follow my lead occasionally?
I'm sorry.
All right, let's get to it. Laura Ray Dickey is with us. She's CEO of the more than 80-year-old family-run barbecue franchise business, Dickey's Barbecue Restaurant. It's based in Dallas. 650 Dickey's barbecue pits locations in 44 U.S. states, 8 other countries. I want to confirm some of these numbers with her. Laura joining us on Zoom in Texas. Laura, so delighted to have you here with Matt and myself. And I hate to say it, I'm going to say it. He is right, because labor, beef, this is certainly our world. First of all, the business of barbecue,
Definitely.
How's it going? Tell us about it.
You know, in general, the business of barbecue is good, but you are absolutely right. Those macroeconomic factors that you see and you talk about every day, all the time, are definitely affecting us because, you know, I hate to say this for Duncan, but America runs on trucks, actually. And so every part of the supply chain has stress for us, whether it's all the fuel costs, labor costs. Our beef packers, for example, going to a shorter work week is directly affecting the price of beef in the market. You know, the beef average this year has been about $4.83. That's about 2 cents higher than it was at an all-time high last year. You know, our price actually is about $3.34 a pound because of our purchasing power. We're actually, with the number of restaurants that we have, one of the largest purchaser of beef brisket in the country in the restaurant space. And so, you know, we really, really feel that food inflation. And so while business is good, we've certainly had to be very proactive. We've taken menu reductions, you know, actually in our 82-year history. This is the largest menu reduction we've ever taken. We've cut our menu by 41% to fight food inflation, to keep from passing on all of those costs to our guests. So
Laura,
it's certainly challenging.
Let's try and break this down a little bit because, so first of all, on your menu, when you see prices of beef, I think have risen a lot more than pork. Pork has risen more than chicken, if I'm not mistaken. I know that feed costs are much higher. The cattle herd is smaller, and so. What does this mean for your menu? Do you raise the price then of your beef products? Are people more chicken? Are you trying to offer more interesting chicken, entrees so that people take those instead of pork? How do you work it out?
Absolutely. Well, so first, you're absolutely right. Beef has been the most affected. It has the largest market cycle, if you will. It's actually a 10-year cycle. But the last 3 years really make the most difference in that price per pound that you're seeing when you go to the grocery store, you certainly go to restaurants. And so that price per pound hit an all-time high last year. And again, we're 2 cents above that this year, and we expect that to stay stable. But in order to, not pass all of that on to guests, which there's certainly a tolerance, that market tolerance that guests just can't simply absorb, you price yourself out of the market. So we certainly do shift to pork. It's certainly for us, the summer of pulled pork, if you will. We have a wonderful pulled pork sandwich, our Kickin' Comeback sandwich, which is great pulled pork with some wonderful Kickin' Comeback slaw on it. And we're doing that intentionally to guide guests towards pork. Chicken is in a good place. It's still high, but not as high as it has been. It's about $3.62 a pound right now. It's certainly taken a break from its high 2 years ago, and you can see the influx of the wing business as well as the avian flu and some other things like that. But chicken has just a much shorter market cycle, so it can recover much quicker, so that you'll see the flux of chicken more so. And that's why you'll see specials roll on and off with chicken with more frequency, although there's a lot of chicken in the market. It's one of the most popular proteins out there, so you have to be kind of careful with that because it can really fluctuate pricing again due to that shorter market cycle.
There's nothing like
pork
I'm
is
going to say there's nothing like a brisket sandwich.
I love that pulled pork.
Well, I agree with you.
I love brisket. Well, so then how do you guys deal with some of the stress points? I'm assuming wages too, and labor is another issue, right?
It is. And that's where it's really challenging for folks in the business at large, in the restaurant industry, is because, again, going back to that supply chain, there is stress at every point in the supply chain, whether it's the fuel costs for the trucks to get there. And with the restaurant business, you have labor not only in the supply chain, but obviously in the restaurants themselves. And then the food inflation that all guests, all consumers are feeling, we certainly feel as well. So you have that, and you have to be really, really, really careful about where you can can take price, but you also have to maintain value. And so for us, we shrunk our menu down to our core proteins. We cut anything from the menu that we didn't feel that we could pass on, what we would have to in order to sell that. For example, we cut smoked turkey, which has been a staple for us, and it will only be here for the holidays. But we just didn't feel that we could pass that on to the guest. So we made that menu reduction.
Go back to diesel, because I just looked at Matt. I'm like, how did energy costs come down? He's like, diesel, right? You guys use diesel to cook it all, right?
Usually. Well, we do. So we use it. There's lots of different pieces, but yes, we do. But it's certainly in the restaurant, in the cooking process, but it's also in the freight, everything. And sometimes what people forget is when you look at all of the markets that you see a lot of different opportunities in retail or folks that have longer shelf life on their products. But for us, because we have 2 to 3 days of perishable product on hand, we're so susceptible to what the markets are doing. And so it's very, very, very hard to be able to work around that labor cost, those stress points, that fuel cost, the labor shortages, and then what the commodity markets do. And so we're thankfully in a position where we have enough restaurants and we have enough purchasing power in the market that we can, again, kind of speculate out buy with speculation, buy and hold, do those sorts of things that a lot of smaller restaurant chains don't have the opportunity to do, or mom and pop may not have the opportunity.
Take us back, Laura Ray, and talk to us about the business and your involvement in it, because I think a lot of people are listening, they think of Dickies as this family-owned business, and they're like, how come, I don't know, Travis Dickey's granddaughter is like a PhD economist, but you actually have extensive experience in the markets. You've worked with agencies and covered big restaurant chains like Chick-fil-A and others. So you come to this CEO position with real experience in the industry, and you have really grown the business. You have 650 restaurants around the world. It's not just like one barbecue pit in Texas. So tell us about the business.
My family in Texas would say just would not be the way to say it. Texas is a good place to be. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, actually, I'm married in, I will say that. So I'm actually the granddaughter-in-law. I missed a meeting and got demoted to CEO is how I like to put it. But I did have a lot of experience in the industry before I joined, actually married and met Roland, and then was drafted into service and thought it would be temporary. And here I stand today. But it's been just that kind of journey of working always in hospitality, technology, and strategic planning in a lot of restaurant clients in that genre. And so have worked with lots of different brands, and there's a lot of similarity, and then there's a lot that's unique about Dickies. But we certainly have grown it. We are now third generation. We are still family owned and operated. I would love for guests to just think that their neighborhood Dickies is the only Dickies. I think then we're doing something right, because that's how barbecue should feel. It's that passion food. It's really an experience. We smoke all of our meats on site. You go in and you should be able to smell that hickory smoke. You should be able to have that experience where you're hand chopped, sliced, or if you are a pulled pork fan, that grass.
Stop! I'm starving. I'm starving now. So wait, just quickly, we only have about 30 seconds. Where's the growth come? Because you led the company into international expansion. Is that the growth? And unfortunately, just got about 30 seconds left.
Yes, there's international growth, but there is still domestic growth. Believe it or not, California is our second largest market, so it's not all vegan country out there. Folks still do like their barbecue. And there's just opportunity in barbecue. There's a lot of burgers, there's a lot of chicken, but there's less and less really, really great barbecue. So there's still markets here.
It's funny that you said California, because I was going to say, what about plant-based barbecue? Is that something that you have to think about? Just real quickly.
Dear God, no.
No. You know what? I like to say we can serve something for everybody. That's where we would do a giant stuffed baker without meat, but everything else will be real traditional barbecue.
All right. Well, come back soon, Laura Ray Dickey, but you have to bring some barbecue next time. Laura Ray Dickey, she's Chief Executive Officer of Dickey's Barbecue Restaurants on Zoom from Dallas. I'm starving.
I can't wait to go to a Dickey's. I'm going to find any reason to get on a plane and go.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Business Week podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business App, and YouTube. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
People are going on vacation, folks. We are in the thick of summer. We heard from the U.S. airlines, too, over the past week or so. United just yesterday. Latest major U.S. carrier to benefit from strengthened global travel. Aren't you going overseas?
I'm going to Spain next week.
See, so everybody's on vacation.
Not looking forward to it.
Why?
It's so hot.
Oh, I know, it's hot. It's going to be rough.
I want to go to Alaska.
Do you really?
I want to go to the Arctic right now. I need to be somewhere cool.
FYI, it's melting.
Yeah, I know, but at least it's still chilly.
All right, so let's get to it. Let's talk about vacationing, demand, and pricing. I'm curious what our next guest is seeing. Montage International founder, chairman, and CEO Alan Firstman is with us on Zoom in Maui. Montage is a luxury hospitality management company. Try that again. It's got properties in California, Mexico, Bahamas, and more. Alan, nice to be talking with you again. How are you? I think it's been about a year. Talk to us about
great to be back.
Well, great to have you. How busy are you guys? What are you seeing?
We're in the middle of summer, busy summer. The resorts have been the place to escape the heat and enjoy the relaxation. Seeing a lot of families traveling, and an exciting time for us.
So, what's it like out there? I mean, Hawaii is like a bucket list place for me. I've also seen Moana like 1,000 times. So
he has a young daughter.
Maui, the name Maui has a special place in my heart. But it's hot here. I can't imagine wanting to go outside. What's it like there?
Well, here it's tropical, beautiful. I mean, the beaches and the pools, amazing. I'm here with 5 grandchildren and extended family. It's just a great opportunity to work a little bit in the morning and relax and enjoy the afternoons with the family.
It's 81 degrees, Matt.
Oh, that's nice. That's not too much.
54% humidity.
I'm just trying to get to what this heat wave and what these air quality issues, what kind of effect has that had on travel?
Well, I mean, there's an escape to markets that aren't as hot, I would imagine, and it's important that those areas that are hot are taking all the necessary precautions to make sure the staff stays hydrated and there's plenty of water stations for guests. We've taken some additional steps of late to make sure that there's plenty of water everywhere. And but hotels and resorts are a good place generally to escape the heat.
All right, so let's, like we said, it's about a year since we last talked with you. Give me an idea. You say, great, everything is a good place to be, but give me an idea in terms of demand and pricing, what it's like. Is demand up from a year ago? Is it down from a year ago? What's pricing like? Is it pricing like in terms of deals? Is it softer?
I will say, Alan, we saw Amex today. They had record volumes, but since they had such difficult comps because last year was so great, the market was a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, I think pricing has come down a little bit over the highs of last year. When you think about so much of the luxury travel heading to Europe and other markets that have opened up that weren't available a year ago, but well above conditions pre-pandemic. So we're seeing some relatively strong numbers still. So that's a very positive sign, and we're just seeing that there's continued demand for highly differentiated special places.
What about for you guys specifically, right? You're involved in the management of these properties. Do you have the workers you need, or are you, again, having to pay up for them?
Well, we've had to pay up, but there's been certainly a rise in costs. But again, it's been market by market. Some markets have been less difficult to attract labor, but it's an important component of what we do. You've seen, though, part of the price increases that have been passed on to guests have come from the need to pay up both for wages and for cost of goods. That's been the story of the inflationary time period we've been going through. It's good to see it settling down a little bit, and we're somewhat optimistic that things will stabilize. We've had a very strong workforce. In fact, we're in the process of opening Pendry Newport Beach, which is going to open in September, and we're hiring over 400 new associates there and have had great success in attracting and finding superior talent.
Are there any have trends shifted at all, pre-pandemic to now in terms of where people want to go, what they want to do, what they're budgeting? I mean, are they focused more on vacations? Because certainly I think a lot of employees are focused more on life in the work-life balance.
Yeah, I think so. And I think the advent of being able to work remotely doesn't mean working just remotely from home. Why not extend your stay at a vacation destination a little longer? And there's a lot of combination. I'll work a little bit, but I'll also be enjoying. So we're seeing longer length of stays as a result of the need not to get back to the office as promptly as we may have a few years back. So that's been a plus for us, being able to work from our hotels and resorts effectively.
Alan, where are people going? Because you guys have properties in Los Cabos, Mexico, obviously in Hawaii, where you guys are, Utah, Laguna Beach, California. I know I'm leaving stuff out. Other places in Mexico.
Big Sky, Montana, for example, it's such a cool, temperature-wise and otherwise, getaway. And when we opened there a year ago, essentially the first luxury hotel in that market, it's opened up a new market. And in the case of Big Sky, you're an hour from Yellowstone, and you get to experience the park, but also the luxury amenities, the outdoor lifestyle. So we're seeing some newer destinations like Big Sky, Montana, and certainly great strength in the other mountain destinations. We're in Deer Valley. We have a Penry in Park City. So good breadth across our portfolio. So we're seeing strong travel throughout.
Big Sky's also close to Bozeman, so it's an easy drive from the airport. And I have to say, my family, we go skiing in Big Sky.
Do you? Yeah.
Love that. Big backcountry, nice off-piste, a lot of powder. Very cool.
It looks gorgeous. Can I ask you,
and plus, you've got a very exclusive resort on the back side of the mountain.
Sounds like
Yellowstone.
Okay, sold. Is it in the Bahamas? There's a 48-acre private island resort and community that I guess you can rent out.
No, we're under construction there. We're building Abacos called Montage Key, private island. We're selling real estate there now, homes, amazing homes on the ocean front, and building the resort. We should open the end of 24, early 25, and it will be an amazing destination, easily accessible, the entire East Coast, and it'll be a truly global destination. Very special resort under construction.
Alan, what's the rates? How has the rates picture affected that? Because when you say that, I think, well, I want to buy a house there, but then I realize I don't want a 7% mortgage. I guess those people maybe pay cash.
Yes, I think there's the buyer for that market is less interest rate sensitive.
Yeah, sorry, Matt. Hey, listen, 20 years in that you guys are. Happy 20th anniversary. What do you think about, you talk about the development you're doing in the Bahamas, but how do you think about what's to come?
The next 20 years.
We've got 14 hotels open today, 7 Montages and 7 Penrys. So we have the 2 luxury brands. We have another 12 projects that are either under construction or in design right now. And of those, 8 are Penrys and 4 are Montages. And we're seeing some real international growth. Initially, we were mostly North America. Now, we're expanding globally. We've announced a couple projects in the Middle East. We just announced 2 hotels in Punta Mita, which is near Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, both a Montage and a Penry there. We announced a project in Barbados. So I think you're going to continue to see both domestic and international growth for our company.
Sounds like you're moving ahead. You're not worried about a recession or those higher rates. Is that fair? Just got about 30 seconds. Or tell me, yeah.
We are, but high interest rates are concerning, obviously, for capitalizing new projects. It's obviously a big concern, and we're hopeful that we've seen the height of the interest rates, but we are very optimistic. We build hotels for generations to come, so we'll withstand small blips if they happen, which are due to happen.
So cool, to think that a kid from New Milford could go to Gettysburg, then he runs the Phoenician, then he runs the Bellagio, and now you found this great big business. I think it's a super cool story, inspiring.
Dream. I've got to tell you how fortunate I've been and how truly lucky.
Well, enjoy Maui, and always good to check in with you. Alan Firstman, founder, chairman, and CEO of Montage International, joining us, as we said, from Hawaii.
This is the Bloomberg Business Week podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business App. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.